The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 16. We slept most all day and started out at night, a little ways behind a monstrous long raft that was as long going by as a procession. She had 4 long sweeps at each end, so we judged she carried as many as 30 men, likely. She had 5 big wigwams aboard, wide apart, and an open campfire in the middle, and a tall flagpole at each end. There was a power of style about her. It amounted to something, being a raftsman on such a craft as that. We went drifting down into a big bend, and the night clouded up and got hot. The river was very wide, and was walled with solid timber on both sides. You couldn't see a break in it hardly ever, or a light. We talked about Cairo, and wondered whether we would know it when we got to it. I said likely we wouldn't, because I had heard say there warn't but about a dozen houses there, and if they didn't happen to have them lit up, how was we goin' to know we was passing a town? Jim said if the 2 big rivers joined together there, that would show. But I said maybe we might think we was passing the foot of an island and comin' into the same old river again. That disturbed Jim, and me too. So the question was, what to do? I said, paddle ashore the first time a light showed, and tell them Pap was behind, comin' along with a trading scow, and was a green hand at the business and wanted to know how far it was to Cairo. Jim thought it was a good idea, so we took a smoke on it and waited. There warn't nothing to do now but to look out sharp for the town, and not pass it without seeing it. He said he'd be mighty sure to see it, because he'd be a free man the minute he seen it, but if he missed it he'd be in a slave country again, and no more show for freedom. Every little while he jumps up and says, "There she is!" But it warn't. It was jack-o'-lanterns or lightning bugs, so he sit down again and went to watchin' same as before. Jim said it made him all over trembly and feverish to be so close to freedom. Well, I can tell you it made me all over trembly and feverish, too, to hear him, because I begun to get it through my head that he was most free. And who was to blame for it? Why, me. I couldn't get that out of my conscience, no how nor no way. It got to troubling me so I couldn't rest. I couldn't stay still in one place. It had never come to me before, what this thing was that I was doing. But now it did, and it stayed with me, and scorched me more and more. I tried to make out to myself that I warn't to blame, because I didn't run Jim off from his rightful owner, but it warn't no use. Conscience up and says every time, "But you knowed he was running for his freedom, and you could have paddled ashore and told somebody." That was so. I couldn't get around that no way. That was where it pinched. Conscience says to me, "What had poor Miss Watson done to you that you could see her nigger go off right under your eyes and never say one single word? What did that poor old woman do to you that you could treat her so mean? Why, she tried to learn you your book. She tried to learn you your manners. She tried to be good to you every way she knowed how. That's what she done." I got to feelin' so mean and so miserable, I most wished I was dead. I fidgeted up and down the raft, abusing myself to myself, and Jim was fidgeting up and down past me. We neither of us could keep still. Every time he danced around and says, "There's Cairo," it went through me like a shot, and I thought if it was Cairo, I reckoned I would die of miserableness. Jim talked out loud all the time while I was talking to myself. He was saying how the first thing he would do when he got to a free state, he would go to saving up money and never spend a single cent, and when he got enough he would buy his wife, which was owned on a farm close to where Miss Watson lived, and then they would both work to buy the 2 children, and if their master wouldn't sell them, they'd get an abolitionist to go and steal them. It most froze me to hear such talk. He wouldn't ever dared to talk such talk in his life before. Just see what a difference it made in him the minute he judged he was about free. It was according to the old sayin', "Give a nigger an inch, and he'll take an ell." Thinks I, this is what comes of my not thinkin'. Here was this nigger, which I had as good as helped to run away, comin' right out flat-footed and sayin' he would steal his children that belonged to a man I didn't even know, a man that hadn't never done me no harm. I was sorry to hear Jim say that. It was such a lowering of him. My conscience got to stirring me up hotter than ever, until at last I says to it, "Let up on me. It ain't too late yet. I'll paddle ashore at the first light and tell." I felt easy and happy and light as a feather right off. All my troubles was gone. I went to looking out sharp for a light and sort of singing to myself. By and by one showed. Jim sings out, "We's safe, Huck, we's safe. Jump up and crack yo' heels. That's the good old Cairo at last. I just knows it." I says, "I'll take the canoe and go and see, Jim. It mightn't be, you know." He jumped and got the canoe ready and put his old coat in the bottom for me to set on and give me the paddle, and as I shoved off he says, "Pooty soon I'll be a-shoutin' for joy, and I'll say, 'It's all on accounts of Huck. I's a free man, and I couldn't never been free if it hadn't been for Huck. Huck done it. Jim won't ever forget you, Huck. You's the best friend Jim's ever had, and you's the only friend old Jim's got now." I was paddling off all in a sweat to tell on him, but when he says this, it seemed to kind of take the tuck all out of me. I went along slow then, and I warn't right down certain whether I was glad I started or whether I warn't. When I was 50 yards off, Jim says, "There you goes, the old true Huck, the only white gentleman that ever kept his promise to old Jim." Well, I just felt sick. But I says I got to do it. I can't get out of it. Right then along comes a skiff with 2 men in it with guns, and they stopped and I stopped. One of them says, "What's that yonder?" "A piece of a raft," I says. "Do you belong on it?" "Yes, sir." "Any men on it?" "Only one, sir." "Well, there's 5 niggers run off tonight up yonder, above the head of the bend. Is your man white or black?" I didn't answer up prompt. I tried to, but the words wouldn't come. I tried for a second or two to brace up and out with it, but I warn't man enough, hadn't the spunk of a rabbit. I see I was weakening, so I just give up trying and up and says, "He's white." "I reckon we'll go and see for ourselves." "I wish you would," says I, "because it's Pap that's there, and maybe you'd help me tow the raft ashore, where the light is. He's sick, and so is Ma'am and Mary Ann." "Oh, the devil! We're in a hurry, boy, but I suppose we've got to. Come, buckle to your paddle, and let's get along." I buckled to my paddle, and they laid to their oars. When we had made a stroke or two, I says, "Pap'll be mighty obleeged to you, I can tell you. Everybody goes away when I want them to help me tow the raft ashore, and I can't do it by myself." "Well, that's infernal mean. I'd, too. Say, boy, what's the matter with your father?" "It's well, it ain't anything much." They stopped pulling. It weren't but a mighty little ways to the raft now. One says, "Boy, that's a lie. What is the matter with your Pap? Answer up square now, and it'll be the better for you." "I will, sir, I will, honest, but don't leave us, please. It's the gentlemen, if you'll only pull ahead and let me leave you the headline, you won't have to come anear the raft. Please do." "Set her back, John, set her back," says one. They backed water. "Keep away, boy, keep to leeward. Confound it, I just expect the wind has blowed it to us. Your Pap's got the smallpox, and you know it precious well. Why didn't you come out and say so? Do you want to spread it all over?" "Well," says I, a-blubbering, "I've told everybody before, and they just went away and left us." "Poor devil, there's something in that. We are right down sorry for you, but well, hang it, we don't want the smallpox, you see. Look here, I'll tell you what to do. Don't you try to land by yourself, or you'll smash everything to pieces. You float along down about 20 miles, and you'll come to a town on the left-hand side of the river. It will be long after sun-up then, and when you ask for help, you tell them your folks are all down with chills and fever. Don't be a fool again and let people guess what is the matter. Now, we're trying to do you a kindness, So you just put 20 miles between us. That's a good boy. It wouldn't do any good to land yonder where the light is. It's only a wood yard. Say, I reckon your father's poor, and I'm bound to say he's in pretty hard luck. Here, I'll put a $20 gold piece on this board, and you get it when it floats by. I feel mighty mean to leave you, but my kingdom, it won't do to fool with smallpox, don't you see? Hold on, Parker, says the other man. Here's a 20 to put on the board for me. Good-bye, boy. You do as Mr. Parker told you, and you'll be all right. That's so, my boy. Good-bye, good-bye. If you see any runaway niggers, you can help and nab them, and you can make some money by it. Good-bye, sir, says I. I won't let no runaway niggers get by me if I can help it. They went off, and I got aboard the raft, feeling bad and low, because I knowed very well I had done wrong, and I see it warn't no use for me to try to learn to do right. A body that don't get started right when he's little ain't got no show. When the pinch comes, there ain't nothing to back him up and keep him to his work, and so he gets beat. Then I thought a minute and says to myself, hold on. Suppose you'd 'a done right and give Jim up. Would you felt better than what you do now? No, says I, I'd feel bad. I'd feel just the same way I do now. Well then, says I, what's the use you learning to do right when it's troublesome to do right and ain't no trouble to do wrong and the wages is just about the same? I was stuck. I couldn't answer that, so I reckoned I wouldn't bother no more about it. But after this, always do whichever come handiest at the time. I went into the wigwam. Jim warn't there. I looked all around. He warn't anywhere. I says, Jim! Here I is, Huck. Is day out of sight yit? Don't talk loud. He was in the river under the stern oar, with just his nose out. I told him they were out of sight, so he come aboard. He says, I was a-listen to all the talk, and I slips into the river and was gwine to shove for shore if they came aboard. Then I was gwine to swim to the raft again when they was gone. But lawsy, how you did fool 'em, Huck. Dat was the smartest dodge. I tell you, child, I spec it save old Jim. Old Jim ain't going to forget you for dat, honey. Then we talked about the money. It was a pretty good raise, $20 apiece. Jim said we could take deck passage on a steamboat now, and the money would last us as far as we wanted to go in the Free States. He said 20 mile more weren't far for the raft to go, but he wished we was already there. Towards daybreak we tied up, and Jim was mighty particular about hiding the raft good. Then he worked all day fixing things in bundles and getting all ready to quit rafting. That night about 10, we hove in sight of the lights of a town away down in the left-hand bend. I went off in the canoe to ask about it. Pretty soon I found a man out in the river with a skiff, setting a trot line. I ranged up and says, Mister, is that town Cairo? Cairo, no. You must be a blame fool. What town is it, mister? If you want to know, go and find out. If you stay here bothering me for about half a minute longer, you'll get something you won't want. I paddled to the raft. Jim was awful disappointed, but I said never mind. Cairo would be the next place, I reckoned. We passed another town before daylight, and I was going out again, but it was high ground, so I didn't go. No high ground about Cairo, Jim said. I had forgot it. We laid up for the day on a towhead, tolerable close to the left-hand bank. I begun to suspicion something. So did Jim. I says, maybe we went by Cairo in the fog that night. He says, don't let's talk about it, Huck. Po' niggers can't have no luck. I always suspected that rattlesnake skin warn't done with its work. I wish I'd never seen that snakeskin, Jim. I do wish I'd never laid eyes on it. It ain't your fault, Huck. You didn't know. Don't you blame yourself about it. When it was daylight, here was the clear Ohio water inshore, sure enough, and outside was the old regular muddy. So it was all up with Cairo. We talked it all over. It wouldn't do to take to the shore. We couldn't take the raft up the stream, of course. There weren't no way but to wait for dark and start back in the canoe and take the chances. So we slept all day amongst the cottonwood thicket, so as to be fresh for the work, and when we went back to the raft about dark, the canoe was gone. We didn't say a word for a good while. There warn't anything to say. We both knowed well enough it was some more work of the rattlesnake skin, so what was the use to talk about it? It would only look like we was finding fault, and that would be bound to fetch more bad luck, and keep on fetching it too, till we knowed enough to keep still. By and by we talked about what we better do, and found out there warn't no way but to go along down with the raft till we got a chance to buy a canoe to go back in. We warn't going to borrow it when there warn't anybody around, the way Pap would do, for that might set people after us. So we shoved out after dark on the raft. Anybody that don't believe yet that it's foolishness to handle a snakeskin, after all that snakeskin done for us, will believe it now if they read on and see what more it done for us. The place to buy canoes is off of rafts laying up ashore, but we didn't see no rafts laying up, so we went along during 3 hours and more. Well, the night got gray and rather thick, which is the next meanest thing to fog. You can't tell the shape of the river, and you can't see no distance. It got to be very late and still, and then along comes a steamboat up the river. We lit the lantern, and judged she would see us. Upstream boats don't generally come close to us. They go out and follow the bars and hunt for easy water under the reefs. But nights like this, they bull right up the channel against the whole river. We could hear her pounding along, but we didn't see her good till she was close. She aimed right for us. Often they do that and try to see how close they can come without touching. Sometimes the wheel bites off a sweep, and then the pilot sticks his head out and laughs, and thinks he's mighty smart. Well, here she comes, and we said she was going to try and shave us, but she didn't seem to be shearing off a bit. She was a big one, and she was coming in a hurry, too, looking like a black cloud with rows of glowworms round it. But all of a sudden she bulged out, big and scary, with a long row of wide-open furnace doors shining like red-hot teeth, and her monstrous bows and guards hanging right over us. There was a yell at us, and a jingling of bells to stop the engines, a pow-wow of cussing and whistling of steam, and as Jim went overboard on one side and I on the other, she come smashing straight through the raft. I dived, and aimed to find the bottom, too, for a 30-foot wheel had got to go over me, and I wanted it to have plenty of room. I could always stay under water a minute. This time I reckon I stayed under a minute and a half. Then I bounced for the top in a hurry, for I was nearly bustin'. I popped out to my armpits and blowed the water out of my nose and puffed a bit. Of course there was a booming current, and of course that boat started her engines again 10 seconds after she stopped them, for they never cared much for raftsmen. So now she was churning along up the river, out of sight in the thick weather, though I could hear her. I sung out for Jim about a dozen times, but I didn't get any answer, so I grabbed a plank that touched me while I was treading water, and struck out for shore, shoving it ahead of me. But I made out to see that the drift of the current was towards the left-hand shore, which meant that I was in a crossing, so I changed off and went that way. It was one of these long, slanting 2-mile crossings, so I was a good long time in getting over. I made a safe landing and clumb up the bank. I couldn't see but a little ways, but I went poking along over rough ground for a 1/4 of a mile or more, and then I run across a big old-fashioned double-log house before I noticed it. I was going to rush by and get away, but a lot of dogs jumped out and went to howling and barking at me, and I knowed better than to move another peg. End of Chapter 16. Chapter 17. In about a minute, somebody spoke out of a window without putting his head out and says, "Be done, boys. Who's there?" I says, "It's me." "Who's me?" "George Jackson, sir." "What do you want?" "I don't want nothing, sir. I only want to go along by, but the dogs won't let me." "What are you prowling around here this time of night for, hey?" "I warn't prowling around, sir. I fell overboard off of the steamboat." "Oh, you did you? Strike a light there, somebody. What did you say your name was?" "George Jackson, sir. I'm only a boy." "Look here. If you're telling the truth, you needn't to be afraid. Nobody'll hurt you. But don't try to budge. Stand right where you are. Rouse out Bob and Tom, some of you, and fetch the guns. George Jackson, is there anybody with you?" "No, sir, nobody." I heard the people stirring around in the house now, and see a light. The man sung out, "Snatch that light away, Betsy, you old fool. Ain't you got any sense? Put it on the floor behind the front door. Bob, if you and Tom are ready, take your places." "All ready." "Now, George Jackson, do you know the Shepherdsons?" "No, sir, I never heard of them." "Well, that may be so, and it mayn't. Now, all ready. Step forward, George Jackson. And mind, don't you hurry, come mighty slow. If there's anybody with you, let him keep back. If he shows himself, he'll be shot. Come along now. Come slow. Push the door open yourself. Just enough to squeeze in, do you hear?" I didn't hurry. I couldn't if I'd 'a' wanted to. I took one slow step at a time, and there weren't a sound, only I thought I could hear my heart. The dogs were as still as the humans, but they followed a little behind me. When I got to the 3 log doorsteps, I heard them unlocking and unbarring and unbolting. I put my hand on the door and pushed it a little more, till somebody said, "There, that's enough. Put your head in." I done it, but I judged they would take it off. The candle was on the floor, and there they all was looking at me, and me at them, for about a quarter of a minute. 3 big men with guns pointed at me, which made me wince, I tell you. The oldest gray and about 60, the other 2 30 or more, all of them fine and handsome, and the sweetest old gray-headed lady, and back of her 2 young women which I couldn't see right well. The old gentleman says, "There, I reckon it's all right. Come in." As soon as I was in, the old gentleman, he locked the door and barred it and bolted it, and told the young men to come in with their guns, and they all went in a big parlor that had a new rag carpet on the floor, and got together in a corner that was out of the range of the front windows. There weren't none on the side. They held the candle and took a good look at me, and all said, "Why, he ain't a Shepherdson. No, there ain't any Shepherdson about him." Then the old man said he hoped I wouldn't mind being searched for arms, because he didn't mean no harm by it. It was only to make sure. So he didn't pry into my pockets, but only felt outside with his hands, and said it was all right. He told me to make myself easy and at home, and tell all about myself, but the old lady says, "Why, bless you, Saul, the poor thing's as wet as he can be, and don't you reckon it may be he's hungry?" "True for you, Rachel, I forgot." So the old lady says, "Betsy," this was a nigger woman, "you fly around and get him something to eat as quick as you can, poor thing, and one of you girls go and wake up Buck and tell him, oh, here he is himself. Buck, take this little stranger and get the wet clothes off from him and dress him up in some of yours that's dry." Buck looked about as old as me, 13 or 14 or along there, though he was a little bigger than me. He hadn't on anything but a shirt, and he was very frowsy-headed. He came in gaping and digging one fist into his eye, and he was dragging a gun along with the other one. He says, "Ain't they no Shepherdsons around?" They said no, 'twas a false alarm. "Well," he says, "if they'd a been some, I reckon I'd a got one." They all laughed, and Bob says, "Why, Buck, they might have scalped us all, you've been so slow in comin'." "Well, nobody come after me, and it ain't right I'm always kept down. I don't get no show." "Never mind, Buck, my boy," says the old man. "You'll have show enough, all in good time, don't you fret about that. Go along with you now, and do as your mother told you." When we got upstairs to his room, he got me a coarse shirt and a roundabout and pants of his, and I put them on. While I was at it, he asked me what my name was, But before I could tell him, he started to tell me about a blue jay and a young rabbit he had catched in the woods day before yesterday, and asked me where Moses was when the candle went out. I said I didn't know, I hadn't heard about it before, no way. Well, guess, he says. How am I going to guess, says I, when I never heard tell of it before? But you can guess, can't you? It's just as easy. Which candle? I says. Why, any candle, he says. I don't know where he was, says I. Where was he? Why, he was in the dark. That's where he was. Well, if you knowed where he was, what did you ask me for? Why, blame it, it's a riddle, don't you see? Say, how long are you going to stay here? You got to stay always. We can just have boomin' times. They don't have no school now. Do you own a dog? I've got a dog, and he'll go in the river and bring out chips that you throw in. Do you like to comb up Sundays and all that kind of foolishness? You bet I don't, but Ma, she makes me. Confound these old breeches. I reckon I'd better put 'em on, but I'd ruther not, it's so warm. Are you all ready? All right. Come along, old hoss. Cold corn pone, cold corned beef, butter and buttermilk. That is what they had for me down there, and there ain't nothing better that ever I've come across yet. Buck and his ma and all of them smoked cob pipes, except the nigger woman, which was gone, and the two young women. They all smoked and talked, and I eat and talked. The young women had quilts around them, and their hair down their backs. They all asked me questions, and I told them how Pap and me and all the family was living on a little farm down at the bottom of Arkansas, and my sister Mary Ann run off and got married and never was heard of no more, and Bill went to hunt them, and he weren't heard of no more, and Tom and Mort died, and then there weren't nobody but just me and Pap left, and he was just trimmed down to nothing on account of his troubles. So when he died, I took what there was left, because the farm didn't belong to us, and started up the river, deck passage, and fell overboard, and that was how I come to be here. So they said I could have a home there as long as I wanted it. Then it was most daylight, and everybody went to bed. And I went to bed with Buck, and when I waked up in the morning, drat it all, I had forgot what my name was. So I laid there about an hour trying to think, and when Buck waked up, I says, "Can you spell, Buck?" "Yes," he says. "I bet you can't spell my name," says I. "I bet you what, you dare I can," says he. "All right," says I, "go ahead." Georgejackson. There now, he says. "Well," says I, "you done it, but I didn't think you could. It ain't no slouch of a name to spell, right off without studying." I set it down private, because somebody might want me to spell it next, and so I wanted to be handy with it, and rattle it off like I was used to it. It was a mighty nice family, and a mighty nice house, too. I hadn't seen no house out in the country before that was so nice and had so much style. It didn't have an iron latch on the front door, nor a wooden one with a buckskin string, but a brass knob to turn, the same as houses in town. There weren't no bed in the parlor, nor a sign of a bed, but heaps of parlors in towns has beds in them. There was a big fireplace that was bricked on the bottom, and the bricks was kept clean and red by pouring water on them and scrubbing them with another brick. Sometimes they washed them over with red water paint they call Spanish brown, same as they do in town. They had big brass dog irons that could hold up a saw log. There was a clock on the middle of the mantelpiece, with a picture of a town painted on the bottom half of the glass front, and a round place in the middle of it for the sun, and you could see the pendulum swinging behind it. It was beautiful to hear that clock tick, and sometimes when one of these peddlers had been along and scoured her up and got her in good shape, she would start in and strike 150 before she got tuckered out. They wouldn't take any money for her. Well, there was a big outlandish parrot on each side of the clock, made out of something like chalk, and painted up gaudy. By one of the parrots was a cat made of crockery, and a crockery dog by the other. When you pressed down on them, they squeaked, but didn't open their mouths nor look different nor interested. They squeaked through underneath. There was a couple of big wild turkey wing fans spread out behind those things. On the table in the middle of the room was kind of a lovely crockery basket that had apples and oranges and peaches and grapes piled up in it, which was much redder and yellower and prettier than real ones is, but they weren't real because you could see where pieces had got chipped off and showed the white chalk, or whatever it was, underneath. This table had a cover made out of beautiful oilcloth, with a red and blue spread eagle painted on it, and a painted border all round. It come all the way from Philadelphia, they said. There were some books, too, piled up perfectly exact on each corner of the table. One was a big family Bible, full of pictures. One was Pilgrim's Progress, about a man that left his family. It didn't say why. I read considerable in it now and then. The statements was interestin', but tough. Another was Friendship's Offerin', full of beautiful stuff and poetry, but I didn't read the poetry. Another was Henry Clay's Speeches, and another was Dr. Gunn's Family Medicine, which told you all about what to do if a body was sick or dead. There was a hymn book and a lot of other books, and there was nice split-bottom chairs and perfectly sound, too, not bagged down in the middle and busted like an old basket. They had pictures hung on the walls, mainly Washingtons and Lafayettes and battles and Highland Marys, and one called Singin' the Declaration. There was some that they called crayons, which one of the daughters which was dead made her own self when she was only 15 years old. They was different from any pictures I ever see before, blacker mostly than is common. One was a woman in a slim black dress, belted small under the armpits, with bulges like a cabbage in the middle of the sleeves, and a large black scoop-shovel bonnet with a black veil, and white slim ankles crossed about with black tape, and very wee black slippers like a chisel, and she was leanin' pensive on a tombstone on her right elbow, under a weepin' willow, and her other hand hanging down her side holding a white handkerchief and a reticule, and underneath the picture it said, "Shall I never see thee more, alas?" Another was a young woman with her hair all combed up straight to the top of her head and knotted there in front of a comb like a chair-back, and she was crying into a handkerchief and had a dead bird layin' on its back in her other hand with its heels up, and underneath the picture it said, "I shall never hear thy sweet chirrup more, alas." There was one more where a young lady was at a window looking up at the moon, and tears running down her cheeks, and she had an open letter in one hand with black sealing wax showing on one edge of it, and she was mashing a locket with a chain to it against her mouth, and underneath the picture it said, "And art thou gone? Yes, thou art gone, alas." These was all nice pictures, I reckon, but I didn't somehow seem to take to them, because if ever I was down a little, they always give me the fantides. Everybody was sorry she died, because she had laid out a lot more of these pictures to do, and a body could see by what she had done what they had lost. But I reckon that with her disposition, she was having a better time in the graveyard. She was at work on what they said was her greatest picture when she took sick, and every day and every night it was her prayer to be allowed to live till she got it done, but she never got the chance. It was a picture of a young woman in a long white gown, standing on the rail of a bridge, all ready to jump off, with her hair all down her back, and looking up to the moon with the tears running down her face, and she had 2 arms folded across her breast, and 2 arms stretched out in front, and 2 more reaching up towards the moon, and the idea was to see which pair would look best and then scratch out all the other arms. But as I was saying, she died before she got her mind made up, and now they kept this picture over the head of the bed in her room, and every time her birthday come, they hung flowers on it. Other times it was hid with a little curtain. The young woman in the picture had a kind of nice sweet face, but there were so many arms it made her look too spidery, seemed to me. This young girl kept a scrapbook when she was alive, and used to paste obituaries and accidents and cases of patients suffering in it out of the Presbyterian Observer, and write poetry after them out of her own head. It was very good poetry. This is what she wrote about a boy by the name of Stephen Dowling Botts that fell down a well and was drownded. Ode to Stephen Dowling Botts, deceased. And did young Stephen sicken? And did young Stephen die? And did the sad hearts thicken? And did the mourners cry? No, such was not the fate of young Stephen Dowling Botts. Though sad hearts round him thickened, 'twas not from sickness's shots. No whooping cough did rack his frame, nor measles drear with spots. Not these impaired the sacred name of Stephen Dowling Botts. Despised love struck not with woe that head of curly knots, nor stomach troubles laid him low, young Stephen Dowling Botts. Oh no, then list with tearful eye, whilst I his fate do tell. His soul did from this cold world fly, by falling down a well. They got him out and emptied him. Alas, it was too late. His spirit was gone for to sport aloft in the realms of the good and great. If Emmeline Grangerfield could make poetry like that before she was 14, there ain't no tellin' what she could have done by and by. Buck said she could rattle off poetry like nothin'. She didn't ever have to stop to think. He said she would slap down a line, and if she couldn't find anything to rhyme with it, would just scratch it out and slap down another one and go ahead. She warn't particular. She could write about anything you choose to give her to write about, just so it was sadful. Every time a man died, or a woman died, or a child died, she would be on hand with her tribute before he was cold. She called them tributes. The neighbor said it was the doctor first, then Emmeline, then the undertaker. The undertaker never got in ahead of Emmeline but once, and then she hung fire on a rhyme for the dead person's name, which was Whistler. She warn't ever the same after that. She never complained, but she kinder pined away and did not live long. Poor thing, many's the time I made myself go up to the little room that used to be hers and get out her poor old scrapbook and read in it when her pictures had been aggravating me and I had soured on her a little. I liked all that family, dead ones and all, and weren't going to let anything come between us. Poor Emmeline made poetry about all the dead people when she was alive, and it didn't seem right that there warn't nobody to make some about her now she was gone. So I tried to sweat out a verse or two myself, but I couldn't seem to make it go somehow. They kept Emmeline's room trim and nice, and all the things fixed in it just the way she liked to have them when she was alive, and nobody ever slept there. The old lady took care of the room herself, though there was plenty of niggers, and she sewed there a good deal and read her Bible there mostly. Well, as I was saying about the parlor, there was beautiful curtains on the windows, white, with pictures painted on them of castles with vines all down the walls, and cattle coming down to drink. There was a little old piano, too, that had tin pans in it, I reckon, and nothing was ever so lovely as to hear the young lady sing The Last Link is Broken and play The Battle of Prague on it. The walls of all the rooms was plastered, and most had carpets on the floors, and the whole house was whitewashed on the outside. It was a double house, and the big open place betwixt them was roofed and floored, and sometimes the table was set there in the middle of the day, and it was a cool, comfortable place. Nothing couldn't be better, and warn't the cooking good, and just bushels of it, too. End of Chapter 17. Chapter 18. Colonel Grangerford was a gentleman, you see. He was a gentleman all over, and so was his family. He was well born, as the saying is, and that's worth as much in a man as it is in a horse, so the widow Douglas said, and nobody ever denied that she was of the first aristocracy in our town. And Pap, he always said it too, though he warn't no more quality than a mudcat himself. Colonel Grangerford was very tall and very slim, and had a darkish paley complexion, not a sign of red in it anywheres. He was clean-shaved every morning all over his thin face, and he had the thinnest kind of lips, and the thinnest kind of nostrils, and a high nose and heavy eyebrows, and the blackest kind of eyes, sunk so deep back that they seemed like they was looking out of caverns at you, as you may say. His forehead was high, and his hair was black and straight and hung to his shoulders. His hands was long and thin, and every day of his life he put on a clean shirt and a full suit from head to foot, made out of linen so white it hurt your eyes to look at it, and on Sundays he wore a blue tailcoat with brass buttons on it. He carried a mahogany cane with a silver head to it. There warn't no frivolousness about him, not a bit, and he warn't ever loud. He was as kind as he could be. You could feel that, you know, and so you had confidence. Sometimes he smiled, and it was good to see. But when he straightened himself up like a liberty pole, and the lightning begun to flicker out from under his eyebrows, you wanted to climb a tree first and find out what the matter was afterwards. He didn't ever have to tell anybody to mind their manners. Everybody was always good-mannered where he was. Everybody loved to have him around, too. He was sunshine most always. I mean, he made it seem like good weather. When he turned into a cloud bank, it was awful dark for half a minute, and that was enough. There wouldn't nothing go wrong again for a week. When him and the old lady come down in the morning, all the family got up out of their chairs and give them good day, and didn't set down again till they had set down. Then Tom and Bob went to the sideboard, where the decanter was, and mixed a glass of bitters, and handed it to him, and he held it in his hand and waited till Tom's and Bob's was mixed, and then they bowed and said, "Our duty to you, sir and madam," and they bowed the least bit in the world, and said thank you, and so they drank all three, and Bob and Tom poured a spoonful of water in the sugar and the mite of whiskey or apple brandy in the bottom of their tumblers, and give it to me and Buck, and we drank to the old people too. Bob was the oldest, and Tom next. Tall, beautiful men, with very broad shoulders and brown faces, and long black hair and black eyes. They dressed in white linen from head to foot, like the old gentlemen, and wore broad Panama hats. Then there was Miss Charlotte. She was 25, and tall and proud and grand, about as good as she could be when she warn't stirred up, but when she was, she had a look that would make you wilt in your tracks like her father. She was beautiful. So was her sister, Miss Sophia, but it was a different kind. She was gentle and sweet like a dove, and she was only 20. Each person had their own nigger to wait on them, Buck, too. My nigger had a monstrous easy time because I warn't used to having anybody do anything for me, but Buck's was on the jump most of the time. This was all there was of the family now, but there used to be more. 3 sons they got killed, and Emmeline that died. The old gentleman owned a lot of farms and over 100 niggers. Sometimes a stack of people would come there, horseback, from 10 or 15 mile round, and stay 5 or 6 days, and have such junketings round about and on the river, and dances and picnics in the woods daytimes, and balls at the house nights. These people was mostly kinfolks of the family. The men brought their guns with them. It was a handsome lot of quality, I tell ya. There was another clan of aristocracy around there, 5 or 6 families, mostly of the same name of Shepherdson. They was as high-toned and well-born and rich and grand as the tribe of Grangerfords. The Shepherdsons and Grangerfords used the same steamboat landing, which was about 2 miles above our house, so sometimes when I went up there with a lot of our folks, I used to see a lot of the Shepherdsons there on their fine horses. One day Buck and me was away out in the woods hunting, and heard a horse comin'. We was crossin' the road. Buck says, "Quick! Jump for the woods!" We done it, and then peeped down the woods through the leaves. Pretty soon a splendid young man come gallopin' down the road, settin' his horse easy and lookin' like a soldier. He had a gun across his pommel. I had seen him before. It was young Harney Shepherdson. I heard Buck's gun go off in my ear, and Harney's hat tumbled off from his head. He grabbed his gun and rode straight to the place where we was hid. But we didn't wait. We started through the woods on a run. The woods warn't thick, so I looked over my shoulder to dodge a bullet, and twice I see Harney cover Buck with his gun, and then he rode away the way he come, to get his hat, I reckon, but I couldn't see. We never stopped running till we got home. The old gentleman's eyes blazed a minute. 'Twas pleasure mainly, I judged. Then his face sort of smoothed down, and he says, kind of gentle, "I don't like shooting from behind a bush. Why didn't you step into the road, my boy?" "The Shepherdsons don't, father. They always take advantage." Miss Charlotte, she held her head up like a queen while Buck was telling his tale, and her nostrils spread and her eyes snapped. The two young men looked dark, but never said nothin'. Miss Sophia, she turned pale, but the color come back when she found the man warn't hurt. Soon as I could get Buck down by the corn cribs under the tree by ourselves, I says, "Did you want to kill him, Buck?" "Well, I bet I did." "What did he do to you?" "Him? He never done nothing to me." "Well, then, what did you want to kill him for?" "Why, nothing, only it's on account of the feud." "What's a feud?" "Why, where was you raised? Don't you know what a feud is?" "Never heard of it before. Tell me about it." "Well," says Buck, "a feud is this way. A man has a quarrel with another man and kills him. Then that other man's brother kills him. Then the other brothers on both sides goes for one another. Then the cousins chip in. And by, everybody's killed off and there ain't no more feud. But it's kind of slow and takes a long time." "Has this one been going on long, Buck?" "Well, I should reckon. It started 30 year ago, or summers along there. There was trouble about something, and then a lawsuit to settle it, and the suit went agin one of the men, so he up and shot the man that won the suit. Which he would naturally do, of course. Anybody would." "What was the trouble about, Buck? Land?" "I reckon maybe. I don't know." "Well, who done the shooting? Was it a Grangerford or a Shepherdson?" "Laws, how do I know? It was so long ago." "Don't anybody know?" "Oh, yes, Pa knows, I reckon, and some of the other old people, but they don't know now what the row was about in the first place." "Has there been many killed, Buck?" "Yes, right smart chance of funerals, but they don't always kill. Pa's got a few buckshot in him, but he don't mind it 'cause he don't weigh much anyway. Bob's been carved up some with a bowie, and Tom's been hurt once or twice." "Has anybody been killed this year, Buck?" "Yes, we got one and they got one. 'Bout 3 months ago, my cousin Bud, 14-year-old, was riding through the woods on the other side of the river and didn't have no weapon with him, which was blame foolishness, and in a lonesome place he hears a horse a-comin' behind him, and sees old Baldy Shepherdson a-linkin' after him with his gun in his hand and his white hair a-flyin' in the wind. Instead of jumping off and taking to the bush, Bud 'lowed he could outrun him, so they had it nip and tuck for 5 mile or more, the old man a-gainin' all the time. So at last Bud seen it warn't any use, so he stopped and faced around so as to have the bullet holes in front, you know. And the old man, he rode up and shot him down. But he didn't get much chance to enjoy his luck, for inside of a week our folks laid him out." "I reckon that old man was a coward, Buck." "I reckon he warn't a coward. Not by a blame sight. There ain't a coward amongst them Shepherdsons, not a one. And there ain't no cowards amongst the Grangerfords either. Why, that old man kept up his end in a fight one day for half an hour against 3 Grangerfords, and come out winner. That was all a horseback. He lit off his horse and got behind a little woodpile and kept his horse before him to stop the bullets, but the Grangerfords stayed on their horses and capered around the old man and peppered away at him, and he peppered away at them. Him and his horse both went home pretty leaky and crippled, but the Grangerfords had to be fetched home, and one of 'em was dead, and another died the next day. No, sir, if a body's out hunting for cowards, he don't want to fool away any time amongst them Shepherdsons, because they don't breed any of that kind." Next Sunday we all went to church, about 3 mile, everybody a horseback. The men took their guns along, and so did Buck, and kept them between their knees or stood them hand against the wall. The Shepherdsons done the same. It was pretty ornery preachin', all about brotherly love and such like tiresomeness, but everybody said it was a good sermon, and they all talked it over going home, and had such a powerful lot to say about faith and good works and free grace and pre-foreordination and I don't know what all, that it did seem to me to be one of the roughest Sundays I had run across yet. About an hour after dinner, everybody was dozing around, some in their chairs and some in their rooms, and it got to be pretty dull. Buck and a dog was stretched out on the grass in the sun, sound asleep. I went up to our room and judged I would take a nap myself. I found that sweet Miss Sophia standing in her door, which was next to ours, and she took me in her room and shut the door very soft, and asked me if I liked her, and I said I did, and she asked me if I would do something for her and not tell anybody, and I said I would. Then she said she'd forgot her Testament, and left it in the seat at church between two other books, and would I slip out quiet and go there and fetch it to her, and not say nothing to nobody? I said I would, so I slid out and slipped off up the road, and there warn't anybody at the church except maybe a hog or two, for there warn't any lock on the door, and hogs likes a punchin' floor in summertime because it's cool. If you notice, most folks don't go to church only when they've got to, but a hog is different. Says I to myself, something's up. It ain't natural for a girl to be in such a sweat about a Testament. So I give it a shake, and out drops a little piece of paper with 2:30 wrote on it with a pencil. I ransacked it, but couldn't find anything else. I couldn't make anything out of that, so I put the paper in the book again, and when I got home and upstairs, there was Miss Sophia in her door waiting for me. She pulled me in and shut the door. Then she looked in the Testament till she found the paper, and as soon as she read it she looked glad. And before a body could think, she grabbed me and give me a squeeze and said I was the best boy in the world, and not to tell anybody. She was mighty red in the face for a minute, and her eyes lighted up, and it made her powerful pretty. I was a good deal astonished, but when I got my breath I asked her what the paper was about, and she asked me if I had read it, and I said no, and she asked me if I could read writin', and I told her no, only coarse hand. And then she said the paper warn't anything but a bookmark to keep her place, and I might go and play now. I went off down to the river, studying over this thing, and pretty soon I noticed that my nigger was following along behind. When we was out of sight of the house, he looked back and around a second, and then comes a-running and says, "Mars George, if you'll come down into the swamp, I'll show you a whole stack of water moccasins." Thinks I, that's mighty curious. He said that yesterday. He ought to know body don't love water moccasins enough to go around hunting for them. What is he up to, anyway? So I says, all right, trot ahead. I followed a half-mile. Then he struck out over the swamp and waded ankle-deep as much as another half-mile. We come to a little flat piece of land which was dry, and very thick with trees and bushes and vines, and he says, "You shove right in there just a few steps, Mars George. Dat's where dey is. I seed 'em before. I don't keer to see 'em no more." Then he slopped right along and went away, and pretty soon the trees hid him. I poked into the place a ways and come to a little open patch as big as a bedroom, all hung around with vines, and found a man layin' there asleep. And by jinks, it was my old Jim. I waked him up, and I reckoned it was going to be a grand surprise to him to see me again, but it warn't. He nearly cried, he was so glad, but he warn't surprised. Said he swum along behind me that night, and heard me yell every time, but doesn't answer, because he didn't want nobody to pick him up and take him into slavery again. Says he, "I got hurt a little, and couldn't swim fast, so I was considerable ways behind you towards the last. When you landed, I reckoned I could ketch up with you on the land 'thout having to shout at you, but when I see dat house I begin to go slow. I is off too fur to hear what dey say to you. I was afraid of the dogs, But when it was all quiet again, I knowed you was in de house, so I struck out for de woods to wait for day. Early in de morning some of de niggers come along, gwine to de fields, and dey took me and showed me dis place, where de dogs can't track me on accounts of de water, and dey brings me truck to eat every night, and tells me how you's a-getting along. Why didn't you tell my Jack to fetch me here sooner, Jim? Well, 'twarn't no use to disturb you, Huck, till we could do something, but we's all right now. I been a-buying pots and pans and vittles, and I got a chancet and a-patching up de raft nights when— What raft, Jim? Our old raft. You mean to say our old raft warn't smashed all to flinders? No, she warn't. She was tore up a good deal. One end of her was, but they warn't no great harm done, only our traps was most all lost. If we hadn't dived so deep and swum so fur under water, and de night hadn't been so dark, and we weren't so skeered, and been such pumpkin heads as de sayin' is, we'd a seed de raft. But it's just as well we didn't, 'cause now she's all fixed up again most as good as new, and we's got a new lot of stuff, in de place of what is lost. Why, how did you get hold of the raft again, Jim? Did you catch her? How I goin' to catch her and I out in the woods? No, some of de niggers found her ketched on a snag along here in de bend, and dey hid her in a crick mongst de willows, and dey was so much jawin' about which on 'em she belonged to de most, dat I come to hear about it pretty soon, so I ups and settles de trouble by tellin' 'em she don't belong to none of 'em, but to you and me, and I asked 'em if dey's gwine to grab a young white gentleman's property and get a hidin' for it. Den I gin 'em 10 cents apiece, and dey's mighty well satisfied, and wished some more rafts would come along and make 'em rich again. Dey's mighty good to me, dese niggers is, and whatever I wants 'em to do for me, I don't have to ask 'em twice, honey. Dat Jack's a good nigger, and pretty smart. Yes, he is. He ain't ever told me you was here. Told me to come, and he'd show me a lot of water moccasins. If anything happens, he ain't mixed up in it. He can say he never seen us together, and it'll be the truth. I don't want to talk much about the next day. I reckon I'll cut it pretty short. I waked up about dawn, and was a-goin' to turn over and go to sleep again, when I noticed how still it was. Didn't seem to be anybody stirrin'. That warn't usual. Next, I noticed that Buck was up and gone. Well, I gets up a-wonderin' and goes downstairs. Nobody around, everything as still as a mouse. Just the same outside. Thinks I, what does it mean? Down by the woodpile, I comes across my Jack and says, "What's it all about?" Says he, "Don't you know, Mars George?" "No," says I don't." "Well, den, Miss Sophia's run off, 'deed she has. She run off in de night sometime, nobody don't know just when. Run off to get married to dat young Harney Shepherdson, you know. Leastways so dey spec. De family found it out about half-hour ago, maybe little more, and I tell you dey wa'n't no time lost. Sich another hurryin' up guns and horses you never see. De woman folks is gone for to stir up de relations, and old Mars Saul and de boys tuck dey guns and rode up de river road for to try to catch dat young man and kill him 'fore he can get across de river with Miss Sophia. I reckon dey's gwine to be mighty rough times." "Buck went off that wakin' me up." "Well, I reckon he did. Dey warn't gwine to mix you up in it. Marse Buck, he loaded up his gun and 'lowed he's gwine to fetch home a Shepherdson or bust. Well, there'll be plenty of 'em there, I reckon, and you bet you he'll fetch one if he gets a chancet." I took up the river road as hard as I could put. By and by, I began to hear guns a good ways off. When I came inside of the log store in the woodpile where the steamboats land, I worked along under the trees and brush till I got to a good place, and then I clumb up into the forks of a cottonwood that was out of reach and watched. There was a wood rank 4 foot high a little ways in front of the tree, and first I was going to hide behind that, but maybe it was luckier I didn't. There was 4 or 5 men cavorting around on their horses in the open place before the log store, cussin' and yellin' and trying to get at a couple of young chaps that was behind the wood rank alongside of the steamboat landing, but they couldn't come it. Every time one of them showed himself on the riverside of the woodpile, he got shot at. The two boys was squatting back to back behind the pile so they could watch both ways. By and by, the men stopped cavorting around and yelling. They started riding towards the store. Then up gets one of the boys, draws a steady bead over the wood rank, and drops one of them out of his saddle. All the men jumped off of their horses and grabbed the hurt one and started to carry him to the store, and that minute the two boys started on the run. They got halfway to the tree I was in before the men noticed. Then the men see them, and jumped on their horses and took out after them. They gained on the boys, but it didn't do no good. The boys had too good a start. They got to the woodpile that was in front of my tree and slipped in behind it, and so they had the bulge on the men again. One of the boys was Buck, and the other was a slim young chap, about 19 years old. The men ripped around a while and then rode away. As soon as they was out of sight, I sung out to Buck and told him. He didn't know what to make of my voice coming out of the tree at first. He was awful surprised. He told me to watch out sharp and let him know when the men come in sight again, and said they was up to some devilment or other, wouldn't be gone long. I wished I was out of that tree, but I dasn't come down. Buck begun to cry and rip, and lowed that him and his cousin Joe, that was the other young chap, would make up for this day yet. He said his father and his two brothers was killed, and 2 or 3 of the enemy. Said the Shepherdsons laid for them in ambush. Buck said his father and brothers ought to waited for their relations. Shepherdsons was too strong for them. I asked him what was become of young Harney and Miss Sophia. He said they got across the river and was safe. I was glad of that, but the way Buck did take on because he didn't manage to kill Harney that day he shot at him, I hain't ever heard anything like it. All of a sudden, bang, 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 goes 3 or 4 guns. The men had slipped around through the woods and come in from behind without their horses. The boys jumped for the river, both of them hurt, and as they swum down the current, the men run along the bank, shooting at them and singing out, "Kill them! Kill them!" It made me so sick I most fell out of the tree. I ain't a-going to tell all that happened. It would make me sick again if I was to do that. I wished I hadn't ever come ashore that night to see such things. I ain't ever going to get shut of them. Lots of times I dream about them. I stayed in the tree till it begun to get dark, afraid to come down. Sometimes I heard guns away off in the woods, and twice I seen little gangs of men gallop past the log store with guns, so I reckoned the trouble was still a-going on. I was mighty downhearted, so I made up my mind I wouldn't ever go near that house again, because I reckoned I was to blame somehow. I judged that that piece of paper meant that Miss Sophia was to meet Harney somewheres at 2:30 and run off, and I judged I ought to told her father about that paper and the curious way she acted, and then maybe he would 'a' locked her up and this awful mess wouldn't never happened. When I got down out of the tree, I crept along down the river bank a piece and found the 2 bodies laying in the edge of the water, and tugged at them till I got them ashore. Then I covered up their faces and got away as quick as I could. I cried a little when I was covering up Buck's face, for he was mighty good to me. It was just dark now. I never went near the house, but struck through the woods and made for the swamp. Jim warn't on his island, so I tramped off in a hurry for the crick and crowded through the willows, red hot to jump aboard and get out of that awful country. The raft was gone. My souls, but I was scared. I couldn't get my breath for most a minute. Then I raised a yell. A voice not 25 foot from me says, "Good land, is that you, honey? Don't make no noise." It was Jim's voice. Nothing ever sounded so good before. I run along the bank a piece and got aboard, and Jim, he grabbed me and hugged me, he was so glad to see me. He says, "Laws bless you, child. I was right down sure you's dead again. Jack's been here. He said he reckons you's been shot 'cause you didn't come home no more, So I's just this minute a-startin' to raft down towards the mouth of the crick, so's to be all ready for to shove out and leave, soon as Jack comes again and tells me for certain you is dead. Lawsy, I's mighty glad to get you back again, honey. I says, all right, that's mighty good. They won't find me, and they'll think I've been killed and floated down the river. There's something up there that'll help them think so. So don't you lose no time, Jim, but just shove off for the big water as fast as ever you can. I never felt easy till the raft was 2 miles below there and out in the middle of the Mississippi. Then we hung up our signal lantern and judged that we was free and safe once more. I hadn't had a bite to eat since yesterday, so Jim, he got out some corn dodgers and buttermilk and pork and cabbage and greens. There ain't nothing in the world so good when it's cooked right, and whilst I eat my supper we talked and had a good time. I was powerful glad to get away from the feuds, and so was Jim to get away from the swamp. We said there warn't no home like a raft after all. Other places do seem so cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. End of chapter 18.